Who invited you? That's not just a figure of speech. It's the exact phrase reportedly shouted by Hollywood veteran Luke Wilson as he pointed toward Meghan Markle in front of hundreds of stunned spectators at the 93rd Annual Hollywood Christmas Parade. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Then, with one brisk nod, security stepped in. The Duchess of Sussex, former royal, podcast host, and controversial Netflix personality, was publicly escorted out of what was supposed to be the most wholesome event of the year. Candy canes, carolers, costumed elves, and a scandal that nobody saw coming. Or did they? Because behind the glittering tinsel, scripted smiles, and slow-rolling floats, something else had been brewing. Whispers of a brewing showdown between old Hollywood loyalty and Meghan's increasingly desperate campaign to claw back relevance. And when it finally exploded, it wasn't on a red carpet or a gossip podcast. It was at a Christmas parade, in front of families, children, tourists, influencers, paparazzi, even a few unsuspecting members of the royal press corps. Why? Why was Meghan even there? Why wasn't she on the official guest list? And why, of all people, did Luke Wilson, the beloved, affable, ever-chill actor from Legally Blonde and the Royal Tenenbaums, lose his cool and take matters into his own hands? More importantly, why is no one in Hollywood coming to Meghan's defense? Is this just another flash-in-the-pan PR crisis, or the visible crack in a much deeper shift, where the elite circles of Tinseltown have finally closed their doors to the Duchess who once dazzled them? Before we dive into the minute-by-minute unraveling of this surreal scene, let's rewind the tape. Because this wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't random, and it definitely wasn't without warning. This was the culmination of weeks, no, months, of mounting tensions. And yet, somehow, Meghan didn't see it coming. But Luke did. The night before the parade, he allegedly received a phone call. A quiet heads up. By the way, if she shows up, we might have a problem, kind of warning. From who? That's one of the many questions swirling in the aftermath of what tabloids are calling the candy cane clash. A holiday PR disaster so potent it knocked Meghan's own Thanksgiving special off trending lists. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because you need to understand the stage that was set. The Hollywood Christmas Parade is no small affair. Since 1928, it's been the go-to event where celebrities and hometown heroes line up for the cameras in front of cheering crowds and Christmas floats. It's televised nationally, sponsored by the city, A-list approved, strictly family-friendly. This isn't your average influencer event with loose RSVPs and surprise cameos. This is carefully curated, scripted, managed, protected, which is why the moment Meghan Markle appeared at the edge of the red carpet, not just walking in, but posing, waving, smiling for the cameras as if she belonged, it created a ripple of confusion. No one was expecting her. Not the organizers, not the press, not the stars already in place, and certainly not Luke Wilson. Now, before you ask, yes, there were rumors, tiny whispers, hints on Dumois, a mention in a page 6 blind item. Something about Meghan wanting to reconnect with nostalgic family programming. A desire to support community traditions. Harmless, right? Except there was no official statement from the event board. No confirmation she'd be appearing. And yet there she was, draped in a winter white coat with red accents. Matching gloves. Designer boots. Hair done in the signature sleek bun. Microphone pinned under her collar. Subtle, but visible if you looked closely enough. Wait, microphone? Yes, because, and this is important, multiple witnesses say Meghan was recording content. Possibly for her next Netflix documentary. Possibly for a new streaming project. Maybe just another attempt to manufacture a Meghan moment for social media virality. Whatever the plan was, it backfired. Spectacularly. But not immediately, because at first, people were just confused. Is she supposed to be here? Is this a surprise cameo? Is she hosting? Did something change? Then came the whispers. Then the uncomfortable glances. Then the fumbled radio calls between security teams. And then, Luke Wilson. He didn't yell. Not at first. He walked over calmly, according to bystanders. Approached one of the parade coordinators. Pointed toward Meghan. Said something. The coordinator looked stunned. Pulled out a walkie-talkie. Still, no one moved. Until Meghan reportedly approached a float filled with child actors from a holiday charity. That's when Luke lost it. That's when he said it. Who invited you? Loud, clear, unfiltered. And that's when cameras started rolling. Because as soon as the first bystander realized who he was talking to, phones came out. The crowd hushed. The music kept playing, but now it was just background noise. Security moved in. Not Meghan's security. They were there too. But parade security, in black windbreakers with credentials hanging from their necks. They flanked her. A tense exchange followed. She shook her head, put a hand on her chest, spoke quickly, animatedly. One guard leaned in. Another looked around, as if waiting for a signal. And then, the crowd parted. And Meghan was led away. But the moment didn't end there. Because now, the internet had footage. Clips, screenshots, freeze frames of Luke's outstretched arm. Audio snippets with phrases like, not on the list, and this is a private event. And hashtags. Hashtag Candy Cane Clash. Hashtag Luke versus Meghan. Hashtag Who Invited You. Within hours, it was trending. Within 24, every gossip blog, YouTube pundit, and pop culture podcast was digging into the moment from every possible angle. And here's the wild part. Not a single celebrity came to Meghan's defense. Not Oprah. Not Tyler Perry. Not Serena. Not even Chrissy Teigen, who usually has something to say about everything. It was silence. A wall of it. Almost as if they'd been waiting for this moment. Or worse, they saw it coming. Because if you zoom out, this wasn't just a PR misstep. This was a message. A coded, unmistakable sign that Hollywood, real Hollywood, is no longer playing by Meghan's rules. But why now? Why at a Christmas parade? And why Luke Wilson? The answers might shock you. Because this wasn't the first incident. Not even the first this month. From tense encounters on sets, to frozen smiles at award shows, to awkward non-invitations at A-list dinners, Meghan's slow freeze-out has been accelerating. Quietly, strategically, and we're about to uncover the whole thing. But first, let's start at the beginning. Not with Meghan's arrival, not with Luke's outburst, but with the red carpet misstep that triggered the whole night's downward spiral. A moment so brief it almost went unnoticed. Until a float manager pulled a parade marshal aside and whispered, "She's not supposed to be here." What happened next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. "She's not supposed to be here." 5 words. Whispered. Meant to stay in the shadows. But those 5 words traveled faster than the Christmas floats behind them. They didn't just ruffle feathers. They detonated the fuse on what would become the most chaotic moment in the 93-year history of the Hollywood Christmas parade. Let's go back. Not to the middle of the parade, where Luke Wilson confronted Meghan in front of stunned onlookers. We'll get to that. But earlier, the red carpet. That's where it all began. And here's the kicker. Meghan Markle arrived early. Let that sink in. She didn't waltz in fashionably late, surrounded by photographers. She didn't make a grand entrance in a limo. She got there early. On purpose. Why? Strategy. Control. Narrative setting. Because in Meghan's world, being early means owning the optics. But there was a problem. No one was expecting her. There was no official name tag on the celebrity lineup. No chair with her name behind the scenes. No float assignment. No publicist hovering with press releases. Nothing. Just Meghan, gliding down the carpet with a practiced smile, arm lifted in a wave that wasn't quite royal anymore, but still performed like one. And at first, the photographers clicked. Reflex. Habit. She still makes headlines. Still commands lenses. But as they snapped away, one photographer was overheard saying, "Wait, is she supposed to be here?" That murmur rippled down the line. Another pulled up the press packet. Scanned the names. Scanned again. No Meghan. Just as she reached the end of the first panel of the red carpet backdrop. You know the one. Logos, sponsor names, a carefully lit Christmas tree prop. A staffer stepped in front of her. Meghan's expression didn't change. She leaned in. Said something inaudible. The staffer responded, shaking her head politely. Meghan nodded. And kept walking. Not storming. Not stomping. Just continued. But here's where it gets strange. About 10 feet behind Meghan walked a man in a blazer. Sunglasses. Holding what looked suspiciously like a media badge, though no one could say where it came from. He was filming her with his phone, casually, yet obviously. Not paparazzi. Not official. Was he with her? And was she creating her own coverage of the parade? Because if so, that changes everything. Think about it. If you know you're not invited to something, But you show up with your own camera crew, mic pack, and photographer. Are you attending or staging? And who gave her the idea that she could pull that off at one of the most tightly managed events in Los Angeles? Because this isn't a pop-up taco stand or some TikTok fashion walk. This is the Hollywood Christmas Parade. It's coordinated by the city, managed by a board of directors, insured, licensed, and live broadcasted. Every float has timing. Every celebrity has a window. Every movement has clearance. So when Meghan passed the first wave of press and headed straight toward the float holding the Children's Cancer Foundation reps, the ones assigned to walk just behind the local fire department truck, that's when the record scratched. Literally. Because the event DJ stopped the background music for 5 seconds. No one talks about that part. But we reviewed the footage. Go back and check. It's subtle, but it's there. A 5-second gap in the festive instrumental, just as Meghan turned on her heels, smiled at a small child in costume, and reached out to place her hand on the edge of the float rail. That's when the float manager intervened. You don't know her name, but her face has been floating around since the incident. Mid-40s. Blonde. Green event lanyard. Christmas pin on her sweater. She gently stepped in front of Meghan. Not confrontational. More like someone trying to redirect a tourist away from a backstage entrance. They exchanged words, and Meghan's body language shifted. Smile gone. Posture tense. She leaned in. The float manager leaned back. Seconds later, walkie-talkie in hand, the woman whispered those 5 words to a nearby security staffer. She's not supposed to be here. And that's when all hell broke loose. Well, quietly. At first. Because Meghan, realizing something was up, adjusted. She didn't leave. She didn't argue. She pivoted. She turned away from the float and walked over to the side of the street, where several influencers and lesser-known TV actors were gathered in a waiting area. Among them, a Hallmark Channel star, a Disney kid actor, and a TikTok baking influencer. Meghan tried to blend, tried to act casual, but it was too late. The whisper had already made it to the event director. And guess who was just a few feet away, prepping for his Grand Marshal wave? Luke Wilson, a man who's been coming to this parade for over a decade. A guy who grew up watching it, who agreed to host because he believed in bringing real joy to real people at the holidays. And now, from the corner of his eye, he saw something that didn't sit right. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Smiling for cameras that weren't even part of the official press corps. Floating between groups with a mic hidden in her lapel. Holding a phone with what appeared to be a live memo running. Luke reportedly walked over to a volunteer and asked point-blank, "Is Meghan Markle on the list?" The volunteer looked terrified. She didn't answer. She turned. And that's when the call was made. Not the call you think. Not yet. Not the security call. A different call. A quiet one. From Luke's assistant to one of the parade board members. You see, what most people don't know is this. Luke had already heard whispers Meghan might try to show up. We'll get into that more in Chapter 2. But for now, all you need to know is this. By the time Meghan reached the influencer group, Luke already had confirmation from 2 separate sources. Meghan had not RSVP'd. She was not cleared. And no, she was not part of the official float roster. She was, in every technical, logistical, and security sense, an uninvited guest. Now ask yourself, why would someone so media-savvy, so trained in red carpet etiquette, so experienced in managing appearances, walk into a highly controlled, public event without clearance? Why would she risk it? Desperation? A miscalculation? Or something more strategic? Because remember, this wasn't just a public appearance. It was recorded, and not just by bystanders, by her team. So was this her attempt to hijack a wholesome narrative? To show herself giving back at the holidays? To subtly shift public perception before launching the next phase of her brand? And if so, did she really think Hollywood would let her get away with it? Because what happened next made sure she wouldn't forget this night for a long time. But it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Not yet. It started with one phone call. And ended with Luke Wilson stepping forward, eyes locked on Meghan, as he muttered, "Who invited you?" But what pushed him over the edge? What did he hear or see in those final moments that made him break character in front of a live holiday audience? The answer? It wasn't Meghan's smile. It wasn't the float. It was something she said to a child actor just seconds before Luke intervened. And it's something no one has officially confirmed, but too many people heard. We're about to reveal what that was. And once you hear it, you may never see Meghan Markle or Luke Wilson the same way again. Let's pick up right where we left off. Seconds before Luke Wilson confronted Meghan Markle, in full view of stunned guests, parade organizers, and security, she leaned down to speak to one of the children on the float. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, wearing an oversized Santa hat, a green tutu, and clutching a candy cane like her life depended on it. She wasn't a celebrity kid. She wasn't there for fame. She was there because her story mattered. She was a survivor. One of the many children chosen by the Children's Cancer Foundation to ride the Joy Through Resilience float, representing strength, hope, and innocence in the face of unimaginable struggle. That float wasn't about fame. It was about real life. And it was heavily protected, both emotionally and logistically. Which is why what Meghan allegedly said next sent ice through the spines of every parade organizer within earshot. Leaning down, she smiled and said, "And we're paraphrasing here, because no official recording has been released. You're going to be on my Netflix special, sweetheart." It was quiet, friendly, drenched in syrupy intent. But to those who heard it, it was the final straw. Because that comment didn't just raise eyebrows. It raised alarms. Why? Because according to parade policy, and this is verifiable, no minors participating in medical nonprofit floats are allowed to be filmed for commercial use without strict parental and legal consent, filed days in advance. There's paperwork, contracts, legal safeguards, and Meghan had filed none. So when the child looked up, confused, and the float manager's eyes widened in horror, the dominoes began to fall. Fast. A parade executive was seen rushing across the staging area, whispering furiously into a headset. 2 security staffers were rerouted from the main gate to the street. And Luke Wilson? He stepped forward. Until now, he'd been standing with his float group, an ensemble of veterans, firefighters, and first responders, shaking hands, taking photos, waiting for their cue. But he heard it. He heard what she said. Maybe not the exact words, but enough. He saw the float manager's body stiffen, saw the confusion on the child's face, saw Meghan casually reach up to adjust her mic. And something inside him snapped. Because this wasn't about tabloids anymore. This wasn't about social climbing or brand building. This was about a line being crossed, in front of a child who'd survived things no adult should have to endure. And that's when Luke reportedly muttered, "No, not here. Not today." He marched over. Not angrily. With purpose. Direct. Focused. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. Not yet. But as he approached, Meghan spotted him. And you know what she did? She smiled. That perfect, curated, palace-trained smile. As if they were co-stars at a press junket. As if this whole thing was a meet-cute waiting to go viral. She reached out her hand. And that's when it happened. Luke didn't take it. He didn't pretend. He pointed. Right at her. And said, loud enough for several people to hear, "Who invited you?" The air cracked. You know that moment in a movie where time seems to freeze? That was it. No music. No chatter. Just silence. Then Meghan blinked. As if unsure what to do. She withdrew her hand, tilted her head, and said something no one has confirmed on the record, but lip readers later claimed looked a lot like, "It's just for content." Just. For. Content. That phrase, more than anything, poured gasoline on the fire. Because now it wasn't just a PR stunt. Now it was exploitation. In the eyes of some, at least. Let's pause. Let's ask you, the viewer, a serious question. If you were at an event meant to spotlight brave kids fighting for their lives, and someone not on the list showed up uninvited, mic'd up, and told a child they were being filmed for her Netflix special, what would you do? Would you speak up? Would you stay silent? Or would you, like Luke Wilson, step in, knowing full well the headlines would explode, knowing it might make you the center of a tabloid storm? Because that's exactly what he did. Luke stepped between Meghan and the float. He turned to the nearest parade marshal and said clearly, "She needs to leave." There was a pause. A beat. The marshal hesitated. Luke turned directly to security, the real security, not Meghan's private detail. "I'm asking you to remove her from the event," he said. Simple. Clear. Official. Then he turned back to Meghan and added, "This isn't about you." Oof. 3 seconds later, the handlers moved in. And yes, for those asking, Meghan did have her own team present. 2 assistants, one holding a clipboard, and a personal security guard with a wire in his ear. But they stood frozen. Why? Because technically, they weren't cleared either. They were guests of no one. And once event security stepped forward, credentials in hand, the power shifted instantly. Meghan tried to speak. She gestured to her chest, the mic still visible under her collar. One security guard spoke to her. Calmly, firmly. Witnesses say the exchange lasted less than 45 seconds. And then, as if choreographed, Meghan turned. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She walked, with cameras flashing, children staring, influencers filming. She was led off the premises by 2 uniformed guards. And Luke? He turned back to the float, took a deep breath, and rejoined the children. One of them, the same girl Meghan spoke to, reportedly asked, was she bad? To which Luke replied, no, just in the wrong place. Simple, graceful, decisive, but make no mistake. The damage was already done. By the time the parade ended, footage had hit the internet. Clips, threads, hashtags, conspiracies, and the question on everyone's lips? Why did Meghan show up in the first place? And more urgently, why was Luke so prepared for her arrival? Because what you don't know yet, and what we'll reveal in Chapter 2, is that Luke had been warned days earlier. Not by the parade board, not by security, but by someone in Meghan's own circle. A mole, a stylist. And what they revealed changes everything you think you know about this story. What if I told you Luke Wilson never wanted to be the center of this story? What if I told you that the man now being hailed as the unlikely hero of the Hollywood Christmas parade actually tried to avoid a confrontation with Meghan Markle? Because here's the twist no one saw coming. Luke didn't step in spontaneously. He didn't act on impulse. He didn't just snap. He was warned. Hours before the parade. Days before the parade. And, if our timeline is accurate, possibly even weeks before the parade. Which raises a bigger, far more uncomfortable question. Who inside Meghan's shrinking Hollywood circle tipped him off? And why? Let's rewind. We ended Chapter 1 with Meghan being escorted off the parade grounds, Luke returning to comfort the kids on his float, and the crowd stunned into silence. But that explosive moment, Luke pointing at Meghan and saying, "Who invited you?" didn't come out of nowhere. It was the end of a fuse that had been quietly burning long before the first float rolled out. So let's go back to the beginning of Luke's story. And let's start with something you didn't expect. Luke Wilson takes this parade very seriously. You might laugh at that, but it's true. Luke is one of those old-school Hollywood guys. Loyal, low drama, charitable, steady. And for 11 years, he's been a recurring participant in the Hollywood Christmas parade. He's the kind of guy who actually shows up to rehearsals, who meets the kids, who memorizes the float schedule, who signs autographs without cameras rolling. This parade isn't a gig for him. It's a yearly tradition, a responsibility, almost sacred. So when he was named the 2025 Grand Marshal, he didn't treat it like a PR puff piece. He dove in, called committee members, asked about the charities, requested background on the kids riding on his float, offered suggestions for the script. He wanted to get it right. And that's why the Meghan situation cut deeper than people realize. Because if you view what happened through Luke's eyes, not the tabloids, everything suddenly makes sense. Let's walk through it. The first red flag didn't come the night before the parade. It came 3 weeks earlier. Luke was in his trailer on a small film lot in Burbank, shooting a holiday-themed commercial. Between takes, his assistant handed him a phone with a message that said, "You might want to know, Meghan Markle has been asking around about the parade." Luke shrugged at the time. Lots of celebrities ask about the parade. It's high visibility. It's family-friendly. It's easy PR. He didn't think twice. Until a week later, he got a much stranger message from someone he barely recognized. A Hollywood stylist he'd met years ago at an awards fitting. The stylist texted, "FYI, word is Meghan is planning a surprise appearance at the parade. Maybe a float cameo?" Sounds chaotic. Heads up. Luke showed the message to the parade chairwoman, who laughed and said they hadn't heard anything official. But official rarely stops Meghan Markle, does it? Then came the third message. This one changed everything. It wasn't from a stylist, not a fan, not a reporter. It was from someone in Meghan Markle's own media orbit. Someone who'd worked with her. Someone who knew her. Someone who said verbatim, "You didn't hear this from me. But Meghan is planning something at the Christmas parade. It won't be announced. Might involve recording. Please be prepared. Be prepared." Those two words stuck with him. So when the parade board held their final run-through meeting the Wednesday before the event, Luke asked a simple question. Is Meghan Markle attending this year? The room went silent. The chair of the board flipped through the paperwork. Twice. No, she said. She isn't on any list. Luke nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't speculate. But internally, a seed of doubt had been planted. A quiet sense that something was about to go wrong. And Luke Wilson, a man known for comedic roles and chill vibes, suddenly had to make a mental pivot into the world of crowd control, event logistics, and crisis preparedness. He even joked to one of the producers. If Meghan shows up unannounced, I'll handle it. They all laughed at the time. They weren't laughing the night of the parade. Because when Luke saw Meghan glide down the red carpet, not in an official capacity, not as part of the broadcast, but as an uninvited, independent guest, the puzzle pieces snapped into place. Everything clicked. The anonymous warning, the stylist's text, the whispers, the unease. And yet, here's what most people don't understand. Luke didn't confront Meghan right away. For nearly 10 minutes, he watched, observed, checked with staff, verified she wasn't on any official list, asked a coordinator to confirm float assignments, checked with the broadcast booth. He didn't storm over angrily. He collected facts. He confirmed the truth. And the truth was simple. Meghan Markle was not authorized to be anywhere near the floats, backstage areas, children, or the broadcast zones. She was, in every logistical sense, breaking event protocol. But Luke still didn't move. Not yet. Not until that moment with the child. Because when Meghan reached for that child on the cancer charity float, leaned in, and offered the now infamous line, "You're going to be on my Netflix special," something inside Luke snapped. It was the one line he prayed he wouldn't hear. Because that's when everything he'd been warned about became real. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a surprise act of goodwill. This wasn't a misplaced invite. This was a strategic intrusion. A stealth media grab. A possible attempt to insert herself into a family-oriented broadcast without following the rules, without signing the paperwork, without permission, and using vulnerable children as the emotional center of the footage. And in that moment, Luke made a decision. One that would ignite the viral clip heard around the world. He stepped forward, called security, and asked them to remove her, not because he was angry, but because the parade's rules had been violated in the one area he took most seriously, the safety and dignity of the kids. But here's where things get even more explosive, and you didn't see this part in the viral clips. As Meghan was being escorted away, Luke wasn't just frustrated. He looked disappointed, genuinely. The kind of disappointment you see from someone who wanted to believe better. And after the floats began rolling again, a parade volunteer reportedly overheard Luke say quietly to a producer, "This isn't over. People need to know what really happened." But he didn't mean tabloids. He meant the parade committee, the board, the city. Because if there's one thing Luke Wilson isn't, he's not a man who picks fights. He's a man who protects tradition. So here's the real bombshell. Luke's involvement didn't end when Meghan walked out. He took it further. Hours later, long after the broadcast ended, Luke met privately with the parade leadership team. And what he told them will shape the next chapters of this story. Because he didn't just confront Meghan. He told the committee who tipped him off. He told them what he was warned about. He told them what he saw. And he told them what Meghan attempted to do. And that's when the parade board made a decision so dramatic, so unprecedented, that it shocked even Luke. A decision that would never be made public. A decision that would escalate the situation beyond Hollywood gossip and into a full-blown Hollywood blacklist conversation. But what exactly did they decide? And how did Meghan's team respond? You're about to find out. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever seen someone try to hijack a moment? Not with violence, not with chaos, but with a smile, a sidestep, a subtle change in positioning. That's what Meghan Markle allegedly attempted on the night of the 93rd annual Hollywood Christmas parade. But it wasn't just about walking a red carpet she wasn't invited to. It went deeper. It went mobile. Because for a brief, surreal 5 minutes, Meghan Markle allegedly tried to swap floats. Yes, swap. And if the reports are true, it wasn't accidental. It wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. Let's break it down. After the red carpet confusion, after the float manager whispered, "She's not supposed to be here," after Luke Wilson started making quiet inquiries, Meghan didn't leave. She regrouped. That's when she made her move. The float she initially approached was the Children's Cancer Foundation float, the heart of the parade, emotionally speaking. But after being redirected and watched closely, Meghan pivoted. She didn't walk off. She walked further in. Eyewitnesses describe her drifting between float groups as if she were looking for someone. One event volunteer told local media, "She had this expression like she was scanning for a familiar face, or a moment she could step into. Then she found it. The Toy Donation Alliance float, an open-sided truck decked out in oversized teddy bears and boxes wrapped like presents, was parked just behind the Grand Marshal section. It wasn't flashy, but it was perfectly timed, because in that moment, the cameras were repositioning for the next broadcast shot. The crowd had briefly thinned, and the float's assigned spokespeople, 2 B-list TV actors and a social media toy reviewer, had stepped aside to greet fans. And that's when Meghan made her move. She stepped up, not all the way onto the float, just one step, one booted foot on the float rail, one gloved hand brushing the edge of the candy-striped decor. She posed, a smile, a slight tilt of her head, and the man from earlier, the one in the sunglasses, holding a phone, started filming again. Was this the moment? Was this the new pivot Meghan hoped would go viral? A duchess supporting toy drives for underprivileged children, all filmed by her own team, completely outside of official broadcast parameters? Seems like it. Until someone noticed. The float coordinator, a woman named Carla, had just returned from grabbing water bottles for her spokespeople. She froze when she saw Meghan standing there. Because guess what? Meghan wasn't on the float assignment sheet. Not for toy donation. Not for any float. And according to multiple witnesses, this is where the tension cracked open again. Carla approached slowly. Politely, she asked Meghan if she needed help. Meghan smiled. Just supporting the cause, she reportedly replied. Are you one of our scheduled ambassadors? Carla asked, knowing full well she wasn't. Meghan didn't answer directly. Instead, she gestured toward the boxes. Do these actually go to the kids? It was a deflection, a redirection, but Carla held firm. I'm going to have to ask you to step off the float, ma'am. And here's where it gets dicey. Because Meghan, according to 3 different sources, said something along the lines of, I'm part of the broadcast, actually. That one sentence caused the situation to escalate. Fast. Because this was not true. Not even close. The Hollywood Christmas parade is governed by a locked production schedule. Every on-camera ambassador has a signed contract, a script draft, a broadcast waiver, and a dedicated liaison. Meghan had none of those. And her claim, I'm part of the broadcast, triggered an automatic protocol. Carla stepped back, hit a button on her radio. Within moments, 2 more staffers converged. This wasn't a security call. Not yet. This was an integrity protection call. Meaning, protect the event's branding, protect the kids, protect the contracts, and above all, prevent unauthorized filming. But here's the kicker. As Carla gently asked Meghan to step away for the second time, a member of Meghan's own team, not her, but the man with the phone, reportedly said, just 30 seconds. We'll blur everything. Blur everything? Blur what? Because unless you're filming your own unauthorized docuseries, there's no need to blur anything. And with that, Meghan stepped off. Slowly, gracefully, but clearly frustrated. She exchanged one more sentence with Carla, too quiet to hear. And then came the moment that shifted the entire tone of the evening. Meghan turned around and walked directly toward Luke Wilson's float. Let that sink in. After being told twice that she was not allowed to engage with official floats, Meghan walked toward the central hub of the parade, the Grand Marshal section, where Luke Wilson stood flanked by decorated veterans and Make-A-Wish Foundation children. Now, to her credit, Meghan didn't step onto Luke's float. She stopped a few feet away, but she made her presence known. She waved at one of the children, spoke softly to one of the mothers, smiled as if she were greeting old friends. And that's when Luke noticed her. That's when he stopped his conversation. That's when he turned. And that's when everything from Chapter 1 unfolded. But now, knowing what we know, the float swap, the filming attempt, the false broadcast claim, and the blur comment, Luke's actions don't seem so sudden anymore, do they? They seem inevitable. Because Luke wasn't just reacting to an uninvited guest. He was reacting to someone actively trying to insert herself into a televised family event with unauthorized footage, using charity floats as background set pieces. And if there's one thing Hollywood protects above all else, it's control of the narrative. Meghan tried to rewrite it. Luke shut it down. But this incident created aftershocks no one could have predicted. Because less than 12 hours later, a clip surfaced online. A short video, less than 10 seconds. It showed Meghan reaching for the float, smiling, saying something, being politely redirected. And then, the video cut. But that's not what made it suspicious. What made it suspicious? The caption, Meghan being gracious, ignored by insecure organizers. The clip was posted by a brand new account, created that day, 0 followers, 0 history, and tagged with hashtag #WithLoveMeghan, the same hashtag used for her Netflix cooking special. Was it her team? Was it a fan? No one knows for sure. But within minutes, the video was picked up by Meghan fan accounts. It was spun into a redemption arc, a misunderstood cameo, a harmless gesture framed as an attack. But here's the problem. The full footage told a different story. Event security leaked additional angles, showing Meghan's multiple redirections, the false broadcast claim, the float team confusion. And just like that, the narrative collapsed. Even neutral media outlets began asking hard questions. Why was Meghan there? Why was she mic'd up? Why was someone filming? And most importantly, why did she try to swap floats with a legitimate children's charity? We'll explore some of those questions later. But right now, here's where things take another sharp, unexpected turn. Because just as public opinion began tilting against Meghan, Hollywood insiders began leaking text messages. Messages sent to Luke Wilson from multiple industry contacts in the hours following the incident. Messages that included phrases like, "We had a feeling this was coming. You did the right thing. This wasn't the first time she tried something like this." Wait, what? You read that right. According to 3 separate sources close to Luke's team, this wasn't the first time Meghan had tried to insert herself into a high-profile event without clearance. And one of those past incidents was allegedly cut from the final version of a streaming platform's awards show recap in 2024. But why? Why would Meghan, a woman with access to A-list contacts, billion-dollar platforms, and the ability to book official appearances, risk sneaking into parades and swapping floats? Desperation? Control? Or was it something more strategic? Because one insider made a cryptic remark that still hasn't been fully unpacked. She's not crashing. She's collecting footage. Footage for what? That's what we'll explore next. Because there's something no one noticed at the parade. Something subtle. Tucked beneath Meghan's coat. A small wire. A blinking light. And a file name visible on her phone's voice memo app, captured in one freeze frame. Christmas_content_draft 1. But what came next would put Meghan's team in the direct line of legal fire, and would raise uncomfortable questions about the real purpose of her appearance. Let me ask you something. What's colder than December in Los Angeles? The air on a red carpet when Meghan Markle walks by, and no one makes eye contact. No one smiles. No one reaches for a selfie. Just a quiet, collective pivot. That's the chill that hung over the 93rd annual Hollywood Christmas parade, even before Luke Wilson pointed her out. It didn't come from the weather. It came from the people, from Hollywood itself. And for someone like Meghan, who once commanded standing ovations, viral headlines, and celebrity endorsements with a single curated photo, this wasn't just awkward. It was an ice bath. You see, what happened that night wasn't just about one woman being escorted off a float. It was the public confirmation of something insiders had been whispering for months. Hollywood had turned on Meghan Markle. But the real question is why? Because this wasn't always the case. In 2020, Meghan was Hollywood's favorite comeback story, escaping the British press, leaving the monarchy, telling her truth. Oprah, Netflix, Spotify, Vogue, Variety. She was the woman who said no to the crown and yes to her voice. She was marketable, mysterious, untouchable. So what changed? Why was she suddenly being treated like an uninvited extra instead of the main character? To answer that, we need to follow the breadcrumbs. Not just from the parade, but from the year leading up to it. And it starts with a single word. Overexposure. You see, Hollywood loves a mystery. It loves a little scandal, a little rebellion, a little sparkle. But what it doesn't love? Being used. And slowly, subtly, That's how Meghan's narrative began to shift in the eyes of the industry. Not the fans, not the tabloids, the gatekeepers, the agents, the publicists, the producers, the directors, the ones who quietly decide who gets to stay relevant and who gets quietly shuffled to the side. Let's look at the timeline. After the Oprah interview, Meghan and Harry signed multi-million-dollar deals. Spotify, Netflix, Random House. The deals were real. The headlines were huge. But the follow-through? Shaky. Spotify cut ties. Netflix's buzz waned. The Archetypes podcast was quietly dropped. A proposed animated series vanished. The content never lived up to the check. And behind the scenes? Frustration. Multiple producers, speaking anonymously, said working with Meghan's team was challenging, overly curated, delays everywhere. One director called it Hollywood at its worst, but without the box office payoff. Then came the social fallout. Remember the LA Gala in spring 2025? Meghan was seated at a B table. Not the front row. Not next to A-listers. Her table mates? 2 reality TV personalities and a vegan pet food CEO. When the seating chart leaked, it sent shockwaves through social media. Was it a snub? Or a signal? Then there was the With Love, Meghan holiday cooking special. It was supposed to be her Netflix comeback, warm, festive, lifestyle brand perfection. Instead, it bombed. Poor reviews. Lukewarm viewership. Social media mocking everything from the stiff dialogue to the oddly edited family moments. One Variety critic wrote, Meghan Markle wants to be Oprah, Martha Stewart, and Princess Diana rolled into one, but comes across more like a malfunctioning Pinterest board. Harsh. Maybe. But it was the moment something clicked. The industry stopped viewing Meghan as relatable rebellion and started seeing her as a liability. And by the time the Hollywood Christmas parade came around, that perception had calcified. Let's go back to that night. In the hours before the parade began, dozens of celebrities arrived. Some were major, like Luke Wilson, Vanessa Hudgens, the cast of a hit streaming series. Others were rising names, influencers, voice actors, Hallmark leads. They were friendly, posing for pictures, trading smiles, swapping social handles. Then Meghan arrived, unannounced, unscheduled, unwelcomed. And it was like someone had turned down the thermostat. The shift was immediate. One by one, celebs stopped engaging. One actor allegedly turned his back mid-conversation. Another whispered, "Oh God, she's here." A young pop star reportedly asked her publicist, "Do we have to be in the same shot?" Even Meghan's old allies, the social climber set, the podcast darlings, didn't approach. No selfies, no hugs, no interaction, just distance. Because in Hollywood, silence is louder than scandal. And that's what Meghan faced. A wall of frosted glass. She could look in, but she couldn't get back inside. But here's the part that stings most. Some people didn't just ignore her. They were watching her, waiting to see what she'd do. One publicist called it a litmus test. If she pulled off a graceful appearance, maybe she'd earn some goodwill back. But if she pulled a stunt, it would confirm everything. Guess which box she ticked? Because once the float drama unfolded, the redirection, the filming, the mic pack, the child quote, the Luke confrontation, any sympathy left in the room evaporated. One studio exec allegedly texted a colleague. She really did it. She jumped the sleigh. Cruel? Yes, but revealing. Because by the end of the night, Meghan wasn't just unwelcome at the parade. She was quietly being blacklisted. No, not officially. Hollywood doesn't work that way. But calls stopped being returned. Bookings paused. Collaborations shelved. The ripple was real. One former Netflix producer confided to a blogger, "I was told to hold off on anything involving Meghan. That it might be optically risky right now." Optically risky. That's Hollywood code for, "We're done for now." But here's the ironic twist. Meghan knows how optics work. She studied them, controlled them, weaponized them. So why walk into the lion's den without backup? Why show up at a parade uninvited? Why mic yourself up? Why film? Why put yourself in a position to be humiliated? Unless the humiliation itself was the point. Think about it. What's the most effective way to pivot a narrative when the media has turned on you? Become a victim. Not a passive one, a targeted one. A misunderstood outsider. A woman bullied by an aging actor at a family event. A duchess shamed for caring too much. But if that was the plan, it backfired. Badly. Because no one bit. No celebrities defended her. No influencers reposted her side. No Hollywood icon tweeted in solidarity. Just more silence. Even her usual allies, Oprah, Serena, Gayle, said nothing. That's when it became clear. Hollywood's cold shoulder wasn't accidental. It was coordinated, unspoken, but united. And the message was chilling. You're not one of us anymore. But why now? Why this week? Why this moment? Because there's a theory, one that's gaining traction. Some insiders believe the parade was supposed to be Meghan's comeback test, her re-entry into public favor. Not through a splashy press release, not through a headline, but through symbolism. A Christmas parade. Kids. Joy. Innocence. If she could make a splash there, if the footage looked right, if the cameras rolled correctly, if she could be seen doing unpaid good, maybe she could melt the ice. Maybe the narrative would turn. But she misread the room. Hollywood isn't looking for another redemption arc. It's looking for a return on investment. And right now, Meghan doesn't deliver it. So they close the door. Gently, quietly, completely. And the sad part? She might not even realize it yet. But she'll feel it. When the invitations dry up. When the scripts stop arriving. When the meetings are rescheduled indefinitely. She'll feel it. And just when you think the chill couldn't get any colder. A private message leaked. A DM, allegedly sent from a studio exec to Luke Wilson just hours after the incident. 5 words. No context. Just this. You did us all a favor. But what favor? And who exactly is us? The old guard? The A-list elite? Or someone closer to Meghan's world than anyone realized? In the next chapter, we're diving into the most explosive part of this story yet. The security tapes they tried to suppress. And once you hear what was allegedly captured that night, the tone, the words, the threat, you'll understand why Hollywood didn't just walk away from Meghan. They ran. You probably didn't hear it the first time. It wasn't loud. It wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't even consistent. But if you go back and watch the original live stream of the 93rd Annual Hollywood Christmas Parade, and you listen very, very carefully, there it is. Right as Meghan Markle walks past the 3rd row of bleachers on Hollywood Boulevard. Booing. Not wild heckling. Not chants. Just a low, scattered chorus of disapproval. The kind of sound you don't expect to hear at a parade filled with children, candy, and carolers. And yet, there it was. A crowd reaction that would spark one of the most controversial debates in recent Hollywood memory. Did the public reject Meghan before the industry did? Or were they simply echoing what had already been decided behind the scenes? Let's examine what happened. Because the moment Meghan appeared, unannounced, uninvited, the crowd didn't cheer. There wasn't the usual burst of excitement you'd expect when a celebrity walks by. Instead, there was confusion. A ripple of uncertain murmurs. Some waved. Some clapped. Some whispered. And then came the phones. People pulled them out, not because they were excited, but because they were curious. Confused. Suspicious. What's she doing here? Is that Meghan Markle? She wasn't on the lineup. This wasn't a hero's welcome. It was a live recalibration of perception. You could feel it in the air, this tension between past admiration and present skepticism. Because Meghan's public image had already been wobbling for months. The media missteps, the failed content deals, the cooking show flop, the seemingly endless, tightly managed photo ops that felt more curated than candid. And now here she was, walking in a parade she wasn't listed in, filming content without permission, wearing a mic, waving like it was 2018 again. To some, it felt nostalgic. To others, it felt off. And then, almost as if on cue, came the first audible boo. Not a roar, just one sharp voice, somewhere near the middle grandstand, shouting, "Go home." It was followed by a few awkward chuckles, a pause, and then 2 more boos. A smattering of groans. One man, clearly older, maybe in his 60s, reportedly turned to his wife and muttered, "Wrong float, wrong era." Harsh. Yes, but revealing. Because this wasn't just about Meghan being uninvited. It was about perception catching up to reality. And in that moment, the crowd, average Angelinos, not tabloid writers, made their feelings known. They didn't want her there. Now, let's be clear. This wasn't a hate mob. No one threw anything. No one swore. There were children present. But the reaction was undeniable. And what's even more fascinating, The booing didn't start after Luke Wilson's confrontation. It started before, which completely flips the narrative Meghan's defenders tried to spin afterward, that she was a victim of Hollywood gatekeeping, unfairly targeted by an angry male actor with no right to police the guest list. Because in reality, the public sentiment turned first. Luke just did what the crowd had already started. He said out loud what no one else in the industry dared to say. But how did Meghan react to the boos? That's where things get complicated. According to bystanders, Meghan initially didn't seem fazed. She kept her smile fixed, kept waving, even blew a kiss to a baby in the front row. But several eyewitnesses noticed something telling. Her hand dropped to her lapel mic. Twice. As if checking if it was still on. Still recording. Was she documenting this? Was she expecting it? Or worse, was she planning to use it? Here's where it gets even messier. Later that evening, a clip emerged on TikTok. It showed Meghan walking past a crowd, smiling, and then flinching slightly as someone shouted her name. Not warmly, not excitedly, more like an accusation. "Meghan, what are you doing?" The video is grainy, but you can see her face twitch. A moment of recognition, embarrassment, or maybe calculation, because that's when she shifted direction, left the path between floats, approached the children's float, and uttered that now infamous line. "You're going to be on my Netflix special, sweetheart." Now ask yourself, was that a spontaneous gesture? A recovery attempt? Or was it a strategic pivot, prompted by the realization that the crowd wasn't buying what she was selling? And let's not forget, at that point, Luke Wilson was watching. From the corner of the staging area, arms crossed. He'd heard the crowd. He'd seen the float attempt. He'd been warned. And when Meghan reached for that float rail again, all while being booed, something in him snapped. He wasn't reacting to a lone PR stunt. He was responding to a public sentiment that had already boiled over. Because booing at a Christmas parade? That's not normal. Especially in Hollywood, where fake cheers are practically piped into the sidewalks. But here, it was real, and it only got louder after the confrontation. Once Luke made his stand and Meghan was escorted away, some in the crowd cheered, clapped. A few even shouted, "Thank you, Luke." Others stayed silent, unsure how to process what they'd just witnessed. Because this wasn't a scandal, not in the traditional sense. It wasn't about cheating, or crime, or betrayal. It was about reputation. And reputations don't fall with a bang. They fall with a whisper, a flinch, a smattering of boos from a crowd who used to adore you. But the final insult came from the official broadcast. Because when the televised replay aired the next day, Meghan had been edited out. Completely. No mention. No footage. No trace. She wasn't blurred. She was erased. As if she'd never been there. And that sent a clear message, not just to the public, but to Meghan herself. You are no longer part of the Hollywood narrative. But why? What drove the public to turn so swiftly? We'll dive into that later. From body language experts to social media sentiment trackers to celebrity statements that didn't make headlines. But before we do, we need to go backstage. Because while the crowd was booing and the floats were rolling, security was recording. And those tapes, the ones they tried to suppress, captured everything. Every word, every tone, every contradiction. And once you hear what Meghan allegedly said when confronted, you'll understand why this went from a PR blunder to something far more serious. Let's pick up right where we left off. Seconds before Luke Wilson confronted Meghan Markle, in full view of stunned guests, parade organizers, and security, she leaned down to speak to one of the children on the float. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, wearing an oversized Santa hat, a green tutu, and clutching a candy cane like her life depended on it. She wasn't a celebrity kid. She wasn't there for fame. She was there because her story mattered. She was a survivor. One of the many children chosen by the Children's Cancer Foundation to ride the Joy Through Resilience float, representing strength, hope, and innocence in the face of unimaginable struggle. That float wasn't about fame. It was about real life. And it was heavily protected, both emotionally and logistically. Which is why what Meghan allegedly said next sent ice through the spines of every parade organizer within earshot. Leaning down, she smiled and said, and we're paraphrasing here, because no official recording has been released. "You're going to be on my Netflix special, sweetheart." It was quiet, friendly, drenched in syrupy intent. But to those who heard it, it was the final straw. Because that comment didn't just raise eyebrows. It raised alarms. Why? Because according to parade policy, and this is verifiable, no minors participating in medical nonprofit floats are allowed to be filmed for commercial use without strict parental and legal consent, filed days in advance. There's paperwork, contracts, legal safeguards, and Meghan had filed none. So when the child looked up, confused, and the float manager's eyes widened in horror, the dominoes began to fall. Fast. A parade executive was seen rushing across the staging area, whispering furiously into a headset. 2 security staffers were rerouted from the main gate to the street. And Luke Wilson? He stepped forward. Until now, he'd been standing with his float group, an ensemble of veterans, firefighters, and first responders, shaking hands, taking photos, waiting for their cue. But he heard it. He heard what she said. Maybe not the exact words, but enough. He saw the float manager's body stiffen, saw the confusion on the child's face, saw Meghan casually reach up to adjust her mic. And something inside him snapped. Because this wasn't about tabloids anymore. This wasn't about social climbing or brand building. This was about a line being crossed, in front of a child who'd survived things no adult should have to endure. And that's when Luke reportedly muttered, "No, not here. Not today." He marched over. Not angrily. With purpose. Direct. Focused. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. Not yet. But as he approached, Meghan spotted him. And you know what she did? She smiled. That perfect, curated, palace-trained smile. As if they were co-stars at a press junket. As if this whole thing was a meet-cute waiting to go viral. She reached out her hand. And that's when it happened. Luke didn't take it. He didn't pretend. He pointed. Right at her. And said, loud enough for several people to hear, "Who invited you?" The air cracked. You know that moment in a movie where time seems to freeze? That was it. No music. No chatter. Just silence. Then Meghan blinked. As if unsure what to do. She withdrew her hand, tilted her head, and said something no one has confirmed on the record, but lip readers later claimed looked a lot like, "It's just for content." Just. For. Content. That phrase, more than anything, poured gasoline on the fire. Because now it wasn't just a PR stunt. Now it was exploitation. In the eyes of some, at least. Let's pause. Let's ask you, the viewer, a serious question. If you were at an event meant to spotlight brave kids fighting for their lives, and someone not on the list showed up uninvited, mic'd up, and told a child they were being filmed for her Netflix special, what would you do? Would you speak up? Would you stay silent? Or would you, like Luke Wilson, step in, knowing full well the headlines would explode, knowing it might make you the center of a tabloid storm? Because that's exactly what he did. Luke stepped between Meghan and the float. He turned to the nearest parade marshal and said clearly, "She needs to leave." There was a pause. A beat. The marshal hesitated. Luke turned directly to security, the real security, not Meghan's private detail. "I'm asking you to remove her from the event," he said. Simple. Clear. Official. Then he turned back to Meghan and added, "This isn't about you." Oof. 3 seconds later, the handlers moved in. And yes, for those asking, Meghan did have her own team present. 2 assistants, one holding a clipboard, and a personal security guard with a wire in his ear. But they stood frozen. Why? Because technically, they weren't cleared either. They were guests of no one. And once event security stepped forward, credentials in hand, the power shifted instantly. Meghan tried to speak. She gestured to her chest, the mic still visible under her collar. One security guard spoke to her. Calmly. Firmly. Witnesses say the exchange lasted less than 45 seconds. And then, as if choreographed, Meghan turned. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She walked. With cameras flashing. Children staring. Influencers filming. She was led off the premises by 2 uniformed guards. And Luke? He turned back to the float, took a deep breath, and rejoined the children. One of them, the same girl Meghan spoke to, reportedly asked, "Was she bad?" To which Luke replied, "No, just in the wrong place." Simple, graceful, decisive, but make no mistake. The damage was already done. By the time the parade ended, footage had hit the internet. Clips, threads, hashtags, conspiracies, and the question on everyone's lips? Why did Meghan show up in the first place? And more urgently, why was Luke so prepared for her arrival? Because what you don't know yet, and what we'll reveal in Chapter 2, is that Luke had been warned days earlier, not by the parade board, not by security, but by someone in Meghan's own circle, a mole, a stylist. And what they revealed changes everything you think you know about this story. What if I told you Luke Wilson never wanted to be the center of this story? What if I told you that the man now being hailed as the unlikely hero of the Hollywood Christmas parade